Okay. Well, welcome to part two. Part two of our basic firearm safety series will cover the double action revolver. As you saw in the first part, the single action revolver has, some distinct disadvantages for the average person. Personally, I like them. To me, they're rugged and reliable. And, it kind of goes back to I have a little bit of a romantic association with the West and the cowboy era, but that's just me. For the average person, they're probably not going to be too interested in a single action revolver for everyday use, especially when it comes to things like, say, self-defense or any type of security work. Okay. Now, the double action revolver is more commonly used for such things. And as the hence double action means that the trigger performs two functions. It cocks and releases the hammer. All right. Just like the single action revolver, there are the three main components. You have your frame, barrel, and action. Okay. The frame are all the parts that hold all the moving pieces together along with the barrel for it to function. The barrel is the part that directs the bullets downrange, and the action are all the internal moving pieces that operate the firearm to load, unload, and fire. Okay, so on that note, again, the trigger performs two functions. It cocks and releases the hammer. Remember, on the single action, I could pull on the trigger all day long, nothing would happen. Now I have to physically cock the hammer back to shoot it. Okay, and this, as we've seen before, this is unloaded and I'm at a private range. Okay. Now, I can do this. I can cock the hammer back and squeeze the trigger for a light, short trigger pull, which is conducive to accuracy. This is primarily what you would use for target shooting. Now, the double action mode is when you just squeeze the trigger all the way to the rear. You notice how it's going to cock and release the hammer. So as I squeeze this trigger, there are internal parts that are going to rotate the cylinder, lock it into place, and then release the hammer at the right time. Okay. Now, that trigger pull tends to be much heavier and a little bit, and it does affect accuracy. So it's long and heavy. All right. So we're going to shoot two double action revolvers for this segment. We've got a 4¼ inch Ruger 357 5-shot, which again is used primarily for self-defense, and this is also a handy little trail gun. So it's got a little bit more oomph, for lack of a better term, when you're out on a trail. Yet it's still very light and portable. Now, just some notable differences here. Okay, I'm going to kind of do it from this angle here. On the double action revolver, all right, you have your grip, you have your trigger guard, you have your trigger, you have your barrel, front sight and rear sight, hammer. You have your cylinder, which cartridges are held in a cylindrical pattern. You have what is called your cylinder release. You press this button in, and with your non-shooting hand, you pop out your cylinder. This thing that it rotates on, this piece of metal, it's called a crane. And as you look down, you'll see the cylinder can rotate. Of course, it has to rotate. Unlike the single action, which is on a fixed pin, this here is on what is called the crane. And to eject the cartridges, you have your ejector rod, which you can press, and it'll kick out all the cartridges out at once. So it's much more easy and quicker to load and unload. Okay. The other double action revolver we have here, this is a Ruger Red Hawk. Now, this has been extensively customized. I had the frame, redone, and these are actually Mongolian stag grips. All right. So again, and this particular type of handgun, this is chambered in .44 Magnum. This is for hunting. This is a hunting and dangerous game protection firearm. So if you go fishing in Alaska, this is very comforting on your hip. Again, you have your barrel, your frame, and then all the internals inside of the action. You have your front sight and rear sight. You have your hammer, okay? You also have your trigger guard and trigger. And on the Rugers, you have to press a button in, and then with your non-shooting hand, pop out the cylinder. You have this is the crane. This is the part that the cylinder rotates on. All right, I should say swings out on. And again, if you look down here, you'll see where the cartridges go. The cartridges drop into the cylinder, and then the ejector rod can be used to kick out the empty cartridges. Again, it's quicker to load and unload. We're going to shoot this one first, but before I do, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on my hearing protection so I don't go prematurely deaf. All right. because, again, this is a rather powerful cartridge. All right. Now, I do have hand loads in it, which are a little bit, have been reduced in power. Again, you can make your own cartridges, which, is something that, you might want to get into at a later date when you become much more familiar with firearms. So let me put this on. I got my glasses, which have tempered lenses. Okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to open the action. I'm going to take my speed loader, which is actually invented by a police officer from Kentucky. It's a way to quickly load a revolver rather than put individual cartridges in place. So I'll take it. I'll just jiggle it in. All right. It's easier if I point it down. As you can see, this the cylinder is loaded. When I close the action, it's now considered loaded. This firearm is loaded. We're always going to keep pointed down range. All right. And again, to shoot, I'm going to fire some shots just with cocking the cylinder, cocking the hammer back. So it's going to, you'll watch the cylinder rotate, and the trigger pull is going to be a light trigger squeeze. Oh, that shot low. And then again, to unload it, of course, they kind of fell out because they're light loads. Now, just to show you, I'm going to load it again. And I'm going to fire this double action, okay? Now, keep in mind, those are shooting low because this gun is sighted in from my hunting loads, which are much more powerful. So a more powerful load is actually going to shoot higher than normal. Okay, so I'm just going to fire this double action. I'm just going to squeeze the trigger, which will cock and release the hammer. There. As you can see, it's much less accurate. Double action shooting is generally used for, cases of self-defense or, oh no, there's a bear in the tent and you don't have time to really, accurately pull the trigger and, line the sights up. Although there are some people that can shoot double action incredibly well, but they practice incessantly, right? And so that is the double action revolver. And again, the trigger, double action revolvers, the trigger performs two functions. It cocks and releases the hammer. Okay, this is unloaded, so I'm going to put this aside, and then we're going to move on to the single action auto loading pistol, which will be interesting.